My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 34 years old. I work the trauma night shift at a hospital in Cincinnati. And on Thanksgiving night, while others passed cranberry sauce and carved turkey, my brother shattered my nose against the stainless steel door of our parents' fridge. It wasn't the first time, but it might have been the last I let it go quietly. That night, the house smelled like stuffing and lemon cleaner, but the air between us was heavier than gravy, the kind of silence that didn't come from peace, but pressure. My parents, Linda and George Bennett, sat in the living room pretending to enjoy the game. My brother Jared was digging in the fridge for another beer. And I, stupidly, thought I could bring up something as simple as a question. "So, Jared," I said casually, wiping crumbs from the counter, "I heard Mom and Dad signed over the house to you?" The fridge hissed shut. The silence tightened. Jared turned, the beer still in his hand, smile crooked. "Why? You planning to move back in now that your city dreams failed?" he said. I kept my voice calm. "No, I just thought we'd all be told. I'm the one who drove Mom to every chemo session, sat through Dad's stroke rehab." He rolled his eyes. "You never really lived here. You were always out, nursing school, internships, acting like this town was beneath you." I shook my head. "I was working, but I never missed when it counted." That's when it happened. The blow was sudden. My back slammed against the refrigerator, breath torn from my chest. Then, before I could move, Jared's knee rammed into my face. A burst of white pain exploded behind my eyes, and I collapsed to the tile floor. The ringing in my ears drowned out the game on TV. I felt blood fill my mouth, the metallic taste thick on my tongue. My hands flailed, searching blindly along the counter. My left eye was swelling fast. I dragged myself toward the phone on the wall, just needing help. Just someone. I grabbed it, dialed 9, then, rip! The phone was yanked from my hand so hard it cracked against the floor. My mother stood over me, her eyes calm, as if I'd spilled wine on the carpet. "Stop it, Claire," she said through clenched teeth. "It's just a scratch. Don't make this into a scene." "I'm bleeding," I whispered. "You always do this. Always make yourself the victim." Behind her, Dad barely looked up from his recliner. "There goes the drama queen again," he muttered. I staggered to my feet, vision spinning. No one moved. Not even Jared, who now leaned back against the fridge sipping beer, unfazed. Then I saw it, on the floor beneath the counter. My leather bracelet, the one my patient had given me before she passed, the one I'd worn on every shift since. It had snapped during the fall, blood smeared its strap. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It felt like holding a broken version of myself. Something once meaningful now discarded, unnoticed. No one spoke, so I opened the front door. Cold air slapped my face. I turned, waiting, for someone to say something. Maybe my mother, maybe even a "wait." But nothing, just the sound of the door creaking shut behind me. I walked to my car with the taste of iron in my mouth and a strange calm pooling in my chest. A whisper grew in my mind, quiet but clear. They don't see me, but they will hear me. 2 days later, I pulled into the hospital's staff lot before dawn. The bruises had darkened into a sickly plum. I applied concealer in the car's rearview mirror, but my face still looked like a confession. I slipped through the ER's back entrance, shoulders tight, avoiding eye contact. I didn't want sympathy. I wasn't sure I could take it. But inside, the people were different. "Claire," Zoe, a new nurse, whispered, "are you safe?" I paused. She didn't ask what happened, just, "Are you safe?" I nodded. "Yeah, slipped. Ice." She handed me a coffee anyway. "You take first calls even on holidays. Figured you'd need caffeine." No one pressed. But they noticed. When I finally checked my phone, there were no missed calls. Not from Jared, not from my parents. Just one message from my sister Hannah. "Don't start drama. You know how Jared gets. Let it go. Let it go." I stared at that line until the letters blurred. That's when I knew. I had spent my whole life letting it go. And now I couldn't even feel my face. Back in the ER, under fluorescent lights and the low hum of vending machines, I found a corner in the supply closet, somewhere no one would look for me. I sat on a crate and opened my small leather-bound notebook, the one I kept for things that didn't make it into patient charts. I wrote the date, November 29th, 2024. Right orbital hematoma. Laceration to lower lip. Bruising across upper back. Assault, Thanksgiving. Perpetrator, brother, Jared Bennett. I paused, the pen trembling in my grip. Then I turned to a fresh page and kept going. Only this time, not just what happened that night. This time, I wrote it all. Age 7, pushed down the stairs, scraped elbow. Age 10, locked in the dog shed after Jared didn't want me around his friends. Age 14, blamed for emotional instability after crying during an argument about my school trip, punished with grounding and no dinner. Age 21, called a manipulator for reporting that Dad nearly hit me during a fight. Page after page, memory after memory, tiny bruises and bigger betrayals that had no photos, no witnesses, just me. I wrote until my hand cramped. If this had been a patient's record, someone would have stepped in. There would have been protocol, documentation, mandatory reporting. But because it was family, I'd learned to explain it away. They didn't mean it. It was a misunderstanding. I'm too sensitive. I'm the dramatic one. The hospital intercom buzzed, pulling me back. Code blue, room 114. I stood, tucked the notebook into my bag, and returned to work. That night, after the shift, I sat in my car and turned the heater on full blast. The November air outside had iced the windows, and inside, the ache in my face pulsed beneath the skin like a living thing. I reached for something to It was still sitting on the dry blood on the floor. I wrapped it in gauze, tenderly, like it deserved to live even if it didn't. A few hours later, I walked into my parents' driveway. Not because I wanted reconciliation, eggs, oatmeal. It felt absurd. I rang the bell, despite still having a key. Dad opened the door and said, "Well, look who's back." I didn't answer. Just hung and stepped inside. The house still smelled of rosemary and whatever artificial rose scent they used to mask the truth. Mom was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter with the same dishcloth she used for years. She barely glanced up. "You still look a mess," she said. "Lucky Jared hasn't given up on you completely." I nearly laughed. Instead, I said, "I need something from the attic." "Why?" "There's an old blanket I remember from when I was sick as a kid." She waved me off, uninterested. "Don't fall and blame us." The attic was mustier than I remembered. The pull-down ladder groaned under my weight, and I climbed slowly. My thigh still stung from the bruise. The air smelled of dust, mothballs, and years of forgotten history. I pushed past boxes of Christmas lights and old shoes until I saw it. A cracked plastic storage bin marked in faded ink. Family Photos 1989-2002. I opened it. Album after album. The first was filled with Jared. His birth, his birthdays, Halloween costumes, football trophies. I kept turning pages. Graduation, first car, Jared hugging mom, Jared with dad, Jared on vacation, Jared everywhere. Then I looked for myself. Nothing. A few photos here and there, but I was on the edge, cut off, blurry, or missing altogether. Until I found one album tucked at the bottom, the edges burned. It looked like it had been damaged by heat or carelessness. I opened it. The photos were torn out, violently, fragments left behind like scars. Just one full picture remained, a pink birthday cake with one slice missing, and scrawled in purple marker below it. Claire's Day. My throat closed up. I remembered that cake, strawberry with cream cheese frosting. I had begged for it. I also remembered the rest. Jared had wanted the ribbon from my birthday dress. I'd said no. He'd shoved me into the linen closet and locked the door from the outside. I was 8. I'd screamed for hours, but no one came. When Mom's heels finally clicked past, I saw her shadow. I begged her to open it. She walked away. I curled on towels, fell asleep. No one noticed until the next morning. Back in the attic, I felt my stomach tighten, but no tears came. I reached for a white porcelain teacup on a nearby shelf. It had blue vines, my old favorite. The one I used every night before bed, holding it with both hands like it could keep the nightmares out. It was cracked down the middle. I cradled it in my palms like it was holy. And I took it with me. I left without a word. That night, in my apartment, I set the cup next to the bracelet and opened my laptop. I created a folder called Documentation Phase 1. I uploaded my notes, photos of my bruises, snapshots of the torn album, and a scanned copy of that one picture from the birthday cake. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed to stop pretending it hadn't happened. The following afternoon, I drove past quiet suburban blocks, tulips nodding gently in garden beds. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, not clenched, not shaking, just still. In the passenger seat sat a simple glass dish wrapped in a clean white towel. Peach pie. Homemade. My mother's favorite recipe. The one she used to say was, "Only good if the crust crumbles at the edges." It crumbled, but I hadn't made it for her approval. I parked outside the house and stared at the porch light, already glowing despite the afternoon sun still hanging above the trees. I stood there for a few seconds, pie in hand, listening to the wind move the leaves. Then I rang the bell. My father answered. Button-up shirt too tight across his chest, expression already taut. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Look who finally remembered where she came from." "Thought I'd stop by," I said. "Check on Lila." He stepped aside. "She's napping. Don't wake her." Inside, the kitchen looked like a magazine spread. My mother was garnishing roasted carrots, her lipstick too red, her earrings too big. "Peach?" she asked, glancing at the towel-covered dish. "Fresh from my kitchen." She gave a single approving nod. "Set it by the window. Dinner's in 10. I placed it gently on the sill, then turned back to her. "Mom," I said, my voice soft, steady. "I went to the attic." She froze mid-stir, then resumed with a flick of her wrist. There was an album, labeled 1989 to 2001. Most of my pictures were gone. Did Jared do that? Her spoon clattered into the sink. "You always made everything so heavy, Claire," she said, wiping her hands on a linen towel. "Crying at birthdays, sulking at Christmas, always a production." "You tore them out," I said, not asking. "You were too dramatic," she replied. "Not everything's an attack." She turned back toward the oven, like the conversation had ended. 10 minutes later, the dining room table was set perfectly. Silverware aligned, candles lit, wine already poured. Jared sat at the head, Camille beside him. His new fiancée, all designer polish and polite smirks. Her parents were in town too, sipping wine and making comments about vineyard tours. My place card was at the far end, closest to the kitchen door, farthest from the laughter. I sat quietly. Camille leaned in, smiling. "Reed told us how you once locked yourself in a closet over a ribbon. So dramatic." Everyone laughed, even my mother. "She used to cry like that all the time," Mom added, chuckling. "One bruise and it was a soap opera." Jared grinned. "She once convinced Dad to cancel poker night over a stubbed toe." Their words slid across the table like oil, shiny, smooth, suffocating. I sat still, fingers under the table, curled into fists so tight my nails cut into my skin. This is the last time, I thought. Then, in a moment that felt outside of time, Jared reached for the mashed potatoes. His elbow knocked the teapot, freshly filled with boiling water. I saw it tip. It splashed straight into my lap. The scream ripped from my throat before I could stop it. The pain was instant, searing, sharp, electric. I shoved the chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. Everyone froze. Mom sighed. You shouldn't have sat so close. Jared gave a half smile. Guess you should have picked the other seat, huh? I stumbled into the kitchen, my breath coming in short gasps. I yanked open the freezer. Just an old bag of peas and half-frozen trays. I grabbed a towel, wet it, pressed it against my thighs. The cotton sizzled against my skin. My knees trembled. No one followed. I stayed there, breathing, gritting my teeth, letting the pain bleed into something colder. Something steel. When I returned, they were eating again. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just screamed. I stood behind my chair. Then I turned and walked out of the room. Back at my apartment, I peeled off the soaked pants, wincing at the burn, and changed into soft cotton leggings. I didn't cry. I didn't scream again. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the notebook in my lap. 2 lists: people who were silent, people who helped hurt. I began to write names: Jared, Mom, Dad, Hannah, Camille. Then I stopped. One name floated to the front of my mind, one I hadn't thought of in years. Eleanor Doyle, 8th grade music teacher. The only adult who had ever looked at me a little too long when I limped into class. Who once placed a note in my locker with the words, "You are not alone. I see you." I never replied. I didn't believe her. I picked up my phone, found her name in the dusty corners of my contacts. It rang twice. Hello? Ms. Doyle, I said, voice cracking slightly. It's Claire Bennett, from Lincoln Middle. Silence. Then, Claire? Oh, my. I wasn't sure you'd ever call. I need to talk, I whispered. I think I'm ready now. The next morning, I sat in a small cafe across from Ms. Doyle. Eleanor now, as she insisted I call her. The steam from her chamomile tea rose between us like breath on cold glass. She looked almost the same. Gray hair swept into a loose bun. Kind eyes. Wrinkles that deepened when she smiled. But today, she wasn't smiling much. I always wanted to say more, she told me softly. But your parents, they came to the school, said they'd sue, said you were emotionally unstable. I was young. I didn't fight hard enough, and I've regretted it every year since. I looked down at my own tea. Black, no sugar. My hands wrapped around the cup like a memory. I found an old teacup in their kitchen last week, I murmured. Mine, from when I was a kid, cracked but still there, like proof I existed in that house once. Eleanor reached into her satchel and slid a folder across the table. Inside were yellowed papers, stapled notes, even a counselor referral slip she had filled out and filed all those years ago. I kept copies, she said, just in case. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away. You were the only one who saw me. Not anymore, she said, touching my hand gently. We see you now. That night, back home, I sat on the floor of my living room with my laptop. The folder I had created, Documentation Phase 1, was growing. I added Eleanor's records, my photos, my journal scans. Then I uploaded them all to the cloud. I titled the master file, Project Witness. And then the knock came, sharp, heavy. I opened the door. Dad. His face was tight, jaw clenched, lips barely moving. I heard you've been talking, he said, digging up old things that should stay buried. I said nothing. You're making this family look bad. You want to destroy what little reputation we have left? Still nothing. He pointed at me. You were always a burden. No matter what lawyer you find, you'll never win. Then he turned, stormed down the stairs. I closed the door, hands trembling, but not from fear. It was something else, something clear. They never loved me. Only the power they held over me. I sat down at my laptop, clicked open Project Witness, and pressed Share. I sent the file to 3 trusted people, my lawyer, my therapist, and Eleanor. And just like that, the silence began to crack. The next day, I got a call from Rachel Emery, a childhood neighbor, now living in Michigan. Claire? Same patterns, different child, same house, same hands. I opened my journal and flipped to the last page. Then I wrote, "Do I become the woman I needed when I was 8?" The next day, I baked a new peach pie. The crust didn't crumble. This one was firm. Even. I drove to my parents' house again. I rang the bell. Dad opened it, already scowling. "What now?" "I just wanted to drop this off," I said, "and check on Lila." "She's fine," Mom called from the kitchen. "Playing in her room. Don't make this weird." I stepped into the kitchen, the scent of lemon cleaner sharp. "Mom," I said calmly, "I went through the photo albums. I noticed mine were missing." She didn't look up. "You always took up too much space." "Did Jared tear them out, or did you?" She wiped her hands. "You were too dramatic, Claire. We didn't want to remember all the tears." I nodded once. "I brought you something," I added. "A deadline." She paused. "You have 72 hours to make a public statement. Or I will." Dad walked in, voice rising. "You think threats will work? You've always been unstable." "I don't need to be believed," I said. "I have proof. And now, I have Lila." They stiffened. Then, soft footsteps echoed from the hall. Lila stood in the doorway, holding a coloring book. "Aunt Claire?" she whispered. My mom turned, face snapping. "What did I tell you about eavesdropping? You want to end up broken like her?" Lila flinched. And that was it. That was all I needed. I turned without another word, walked to the kitchen, reached up to the highest cabinet. My old teacup still sat there, chipped, faded, but whole. I slid it into my bag and left. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk, laptop open, tea gone cold beside me. In my hand was a flash drive containing everything: photos, medical notes, Eleanor's documents, and now a chilling audio file. Lila's voice, soft, cracking. "I didn't mean to drop it. I'm sorry. Please don't shut me out there again." Then my mother's reply. Cold. Controlled. "Well, maybe if you listened the first time, you wouldn't be punished. Go." I had recorded it through the baby monitor app I'd helped Rachel set up weeks ago. She'd forgotten to turn it off. Thank God. 2 days later, I walked into the monthly Hamilton County School Board meeting. The auditorium was small, lined with folding chairs and polite smiles. On stage, a woman in a navy blazer stood behind the podium, reading from a sheet. "Tonight, we're proud to recognize George and Linda Bennett, longtime community supporters and mentors to local youth." Applause. I sat in the back row, file folder on my lap. I waited. When the board chair asked, "Would anyone like to say a few words?" I stood. "Yes," I said. Heads turned. "I'm Claire Bennett, their daughter." Silence. "I'd like you to hear something before you hand them an award." I walked to the front, plugged the flash drive into the board's laptop, and hit play. Lila's voice filled the room. Then Mom's. Gasps. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" A woman covered her mouth. A man in the front row shook his head in disbelief. When the clip ended, I said, "I was her once. I was told I was dramatic, overreacting. But now you've heard it. This is real. This has always been real." Then, from the crowd, Mrs. Zeller, Lila's elementary school music teacher, stood. "I filed a bruise report last spring. No one followed up." Another woman stood. "We're neighbors. We hear yelling every weekend." And then another. It snowballed. My father pushed his way to the podium. "She's unstable," he barked, waving a folded paper. "She was hospitalized for mental illness 3 years ago. We have proof." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. A voice rang out from the third row. "That's not true." Dr. Sharon Levin, my former attending physician at the hospital, rose. "That document has been doctored. Claire was never treated for mental illness. Her medical file was falsified." The room shifted. My father lowered the paper, his face gray. I reached into my bag, pulled out the cracked porcelain teacup, and placed it on the podium. "This cup," I said, "used to hold tea while I iced my bruises. My mother said I dropped it. I didn't. She cracked it, and I kept it, because I always hoped I'd fill it with truth one day. Police arrived quietly in the back. My parents didn't resist. They didn't speak. As they walked down the aisle in handcuffs, Lila peeked out from the hallway door. She looked at me, not afraid, not confused, just watching. Later that night, I met her at the group foster shelter. She was curled up with a threadbare stuffed animal. She asked me. No, sweetheart, I said. Not ever. I pulled a box from my bag and opened it. Inside was a white porcelain, decorated with blue forget-me-nots, uncracked. This is for you. You don't need permission to use it. It's yours. She touched it gently, her fingers hesitant. It's really pretty, she whispered. Can it stay with you? Of course. I took the old sugar teacup and placed it beside the new one on the windowsill. One cracked, one whole, both safe. A week later, my lawyer, Jeanette Carson, handed me a stack of documents. Claire, she said, tapping the top paper. Child Protective Services has filed charges. Child endangerment, falsifying medical records, obstruction of mandated reporting. I nodded. And Lila? She's in temporary placement for now, but your guardianship application is solid. The evidence is overwhelming. I doubt the court will contest it. I exhaled slowly, deeply. Add one clause, I said. Jeanette raised an eyebrow. No contact, ever. Letters, emails, surprise calls. Nothing. I want it airtight. She nodded. Done. Later, as I passed the cafe where my mother once told me, "No one will believe your little stories," I whispered to the air. They listened, the moment I stopped trying to make it sound better. That afternoon, a young reporter caught me leaving Lila's school. "Ms. Bennett," she asked, her voice soft, "why didn't you speak sooner?" I paused. The sun warmed my shoulders. "Because no one ever asked how I was doing," I said. "They just called me dramatic." She lowered her mic, eyes shimmering. "Thank you." That evening, back at home, Lila helped me set the table. Just 2 plates. No candles, no fine china. Just warmth. She looked at me after dinner, her tiny voice filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time. "Are we a real family now?" I smiled. "We're the only kind that matters." Later, I lit one candle, opened a new journal, and wrote on the first page, beneath the title I had embossed in gold, "Things I was told never to say." They never hit me hard enough to kill me, just hard enough to make me quiet. But I'm not quiet anymore, and neither is she. There are some truths so long buried that when they finally break the surface, they shake the ground beneath us. Claire Bennett's story is not just about bruises or broken noses. It's about silence. About the kind that starts as a whisper and grows louder every time we're told we're overreacting, being dramatic, or just too sensitive. But silence has a cost, and for Claire, the final price was nearly paid by a child repeating her pain. When Claire stood up, it wasn't out of vengeance. It was protection, of herself, of Layla, of every little girl told to keep quiet because that's just how family is. She didn't seek pity, she sought clarity, and through her courage, others began to speak. The neighbor, the teacher, the physician. A community that once looked away now bore witness. In the end, justice wasn't just legal, it was emotional. It was the calm in Claire's hands as she poured tea into a new cup, uncracked. It was the stillness in Lila's eyes as she realized she wouldn't be sent back. And it was the simple, everyday act of sitting at a table, setting down 2 plates, and calling it home. Because healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it settles into a quiet room, a single candle, and the freedom to finally write what was never allowed to be said.